Those messages are that black men are dangerous because if you look at the news, there have been studies on this. Local news overrepresents black folks as perpetrators, overrepresents white folks as victims. So the message that gets sent is they're dangerous, and specifically to you. They are not only bad people, they're going to hurt you. So therefore, we want to keep them on that side of town. We want to keep their children in those schools over there. We don't want to work around them. We don't want to live around them, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that message comes through loud and clear in the way that media represents people of color. You know, whenever we, thinking about Tamir Rice, the 12-year-old child that was shot in Cleveland by police, when that happened, what did they do? The first news story in Cleveland that made a big splash was about Tamir Rice's parents and the history of domestic abuse and criminality among his parents, not about the cop that killed him. We talk worse about black victims than we do white killers. What did we say about Ted Bundy? Oh, he was so smart and he was so quiet and he always seemed so nice. Every time one of these white boys goes and shoots up a school, what do we say? We had no idea he was going to do this. So we talk better. We have more sympathy for white folks who commit mass murder, bury bodies under the house, cook them up in a soup pot and eat them, right? Than we do black folks who were killed by police. We start digging for every bad thing they ever did. We want to know if they had a juvenile record. We want to know if they'd ever been arrested. That's what the media does. And until that changes, I'm afraid white folks will stay in denial, and it'll be very hard for us to move forward, whether we're talking about cops or just average everyday folks.
Yeah folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and if you're watching me for the first time, please kindly consider subscribing, like and share. So folks, America is changing, and so is the conversation about race, conversation about history and power under none other than President Donald Trump's administration. Now, one viral message from an author, an anti-racism educator, Tim Wise, has reignited one of the country's most heated debates, leaving supporters, critics and political commentators asking the same question. And what is the question, folks? Has America truly moved forward, or is history actually repeating itself? What Tim Wise said has sparked intense reaction across the political spectrum, and the implications go far beyond politics. So watch the following video, then stay with us, and we'll break down what was said, why it matters, and why this debate is capturing attention across America. Before we begin, folks, don't forget to subscribe, like and share. Now, let's get after it.
If you don't understand, for instance, the history, the predicate, what came before when it comes to the subject of law enforcement misconduct in black and brown communities, for instance, right? If you don't know that history because it was never taught to you, right? Then a movement like Black Lives Matter won't make sense to you. If you don't understand the way that black life has been discounted and denigrated and has not mattered institutionally to an awful lot of folks, right? Then somebody proclaiming that Black Lives Matter will seem irrational. It will seem horribly militant and separatist and maybe even hateful. And then you'll say things like, but what about my life? What about me? All lives matter, don't they? What about me? I know, precious. I know your life matters. I know my life. You don't have to tell me that all lives matter. I get that. But trust me when I tell you that in this country, when black lives finally do matter, at the institutional and systemic level, all of our lives will. And not one moment before that, see? But when white folks were asked that question in 1963, when it was happening, when it was the present, not 60 years in the rearview mirror, and they were asked it by the Gallup organization in that year. The question was, do you believe black folks are treated equally in your community in education, housing, and employment? Now, come on, y'all. It's 1963.
We know the answer. This is before the Civil Rights Act, before the Voting Rights Act, before the Fair Housing Act. It is the year of the March on Washington, the year that Medgar Evers is shot down dead in his driveway in Jackson, Mississippi, the year that Governor Wallace stands in the schoolhouse door at the University of Alabama and says, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. It is the year that he turns those dogs and water cannons in Birmingham on those children at the behest of Bull Connor. So we know the answer to the question. This is not a hard pop quiz. The answer is no, but what do you think white Americans in 1963 said? 2 out of 3 answered the question, yes, everything here is fine. There is nothing to see. There are only 2 possible explanations for why the vast majority of white folks couldn't see the truth. Explanation number 1 is that white folks are just so stupid and ignorant and cold-hearted that they just can't see or just refuse to see. I don't happen to believe that's true. I think there's an easier and a more disturbing answer to the question, and it's about privilege. The reason white folks didn't know is because they didn't have to know.
Tell me how you define white identity and what you think is being erased about white identity.
Certain types of Anglo-derived culture that comes from our history.
Like what?
Let me think about this. Senator, I would say if you were to look at the book by one of your former Senate colleagues, Born Fighting, about the sort of Scotch-Irish military culture and certain, pride that went with that, that would be one example. Obviously, you could have sub-elements of that culture. You could have Italians, you could have Irish, and those are in many ways more
But you're worried about white culture. You're not worried about, you're now retreating to ethnic identity. You don't speak about ethnic identity. You speak about white identity. So tell me the values that stitch together white identity and that make it different than black identity.
I would say that the white church is very different than the black church in terms of its tone and style on average. Foodways could often be different.
And those
music could be different.
And those are being erased.
Music could be different. Well, if you look at the Super Bowl halftime show, which was not in English this year.
So our ability to access white churches or white food or white music is being erased?
I am concerned with the majority common American culture that we had for some time that through particularly mass immigration, I think has become much more balkanized, and I think that weakens us. And again, I'm not running away from that comment. I'm not apologizing for it.
Well, I'm way over my time. I think you're struggling to answer this question, right? Because underlying your beliefs is a sentiment that white culture is just simply better.
This one guy, you saw him in the Starbucks. This white man melted down in a Starbucks, yelled at a black barista, called her everything but a child of God, used every possible racial slur, pointed out, I voted for Trump, like that was at all relevant to his latte purchase, right? But he apparently got bad service and wanted to let everybody know that, by God, I'm a Trump voter and you're and he uses the N-word, and it's all on video. And his point was that he feels oppressed because he got bad service at the Starbucks. Y'all, if you think that bad service at the Starbucks, like they put soy milk in and you ask for 2%, like if you think that that is oppression, you have just proven white privilege with a vengeance. Better than me or my books or Carol Anderson or her books or any person of color ever possibly could. Because if you think that's oppression, you don't know what oppression is. So thank you for the assist, in the pedagogical approach of what I'm trying to do. And there was the white woman in the Michaels in Chicago, right? Bought too much stuff to fit into the plastic bags that they give you. And so the black woman who was the clerk said, hey, we've got these, reusable, recyclable bags. It'll just be $1. Your stuff will fit in there better. And she goes ballistic, starts using racial slurs at her. Again, talks about being a Trump voter like it's relevant to her crafting or whatever she was doing with the stuff from Michael's. Once again, thinking that she's oppressed because they asked her to buy a $1 bag, y'all. A $1 bag was oppression. See, this is what Robin DiAngelo talks about as white fragility, right? This idea that we're just sort of like, and it's funny because these are the people that call progressive snowflakes, right? These are the people that, those of us who fight racism, well, you're snowflakes because you can't handle what, like you get triggered too easily, you think everything is racism. So we're the snowflakes. This coming from people who sort of lost their mind when they redid Annie with a black character, right? These are, they redid Annie with a black actress and Jamie Foxx, and it was like, you can't redo Annie. It's a classic. She's an orphan and she has red hair, and then They made Rue black in the Hunger Games, and we're like, oh, no, no, no. You can't do that. So, you know, sort of interesting when you call someone a snowflake and you melt that easily. But that's sort of where white rage is. It's gotten to this absurdity, but it's always been there. It was Justice Joseph Bradley of the Supreme Court in 1883 who first coined the concept of sort of reverse discrimination against white people when he, along with his colleagues, threw out many of the Reconstruction era civil rights laws by saying that it was time for the Negro to stop being the special favorite of the law and join the rest of us as mere citizens, right? This is sort of ironic considering that up until a few years before, only whites could be citizens and were considered as such. But now all that special treatment, you know, the Freedmen's Bureau, which lasted about a minute, and the Freedmen's Bank, which lasted about another minute, was too much favoritism. So again, this stuff has been around, and I want us to remember that because folks fought that then, and we don't have to be disheartened now. It's really not a unique moment. It just goes to show that, you know, as I think we might all know, Donald Trump didn't really think of something new, right? This isn't some new stuff, right? It's a lot easier to fight the monster when you've seen him before. That's all I'm saying. The third thing that Trumpism is predicated on is this long-standing divide and conquer thing. Now, I think I probably talked about this last time I was here, and I looked at the video this morning because I don't want to repeat myself. But then Albert, my buddy, you know, he says to me, you know, Tim, when the Stones play, they still do Satisfaction. So, so I was like, okay, all right. Well, I'm not Mick Jagger, and y'all ain't paying me like the Stones, but if I did repeat this, if I am being repetitive here, it's because it's an important tune and an important note to hit, right? You know, the history of the country is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. I mean, that's America sort of in a nutshell when it comes to race and class, right? If you had to put I don't know, it may be too many syllables for a haiku, but you know, it's like basically if you had to come up with a very short phrase that you could, I don't know, maybe too long for a bumper sticker also, but it's the history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It begins in the colonial period, right? When whiteness wasn't even a thing yet. There was no white race. We didn't love each other. We spent most of our time in Europe killing each other. The English hated the Irish hated them back. Northern Italians didn't consider Southern Italians to even be Italian. This immigration drama that we have right now is only possible because we don't understand our own history. As a country, and particularly those of us of European descent, we have lied to ourselves about how we got here and for what reason. See, black folks know why they're here. Native peoples know why they're here and how they got here. A lot of Asian folk know, particularly if they're Chinese American, they know they got here because their ancestors were brought over to work on the railroads by the railroad barons who didn't care if thousands of them died laying track 19, 20 hours a day. But for those of us who are from Europe, we have this fiction that we've told, and we believe it, even though there's no truth to it. You know what the fiction is? It's two parts. Number one, we say things like, with regard to Mexicans coming over the border, with regard to immigrants coming over, but only that border. That's the only one we care about, right? The southern border. I find that interesting. We're not flipping out about Canada, right? We only care about that one border, forgetting for a minute that that border was created at the end of a war that was started on false pretense by this country, after which we jacked half of their country. And you weren't taught that in school either because our history books aren't interested in telling the truth. They tell this very patriotic history that has no relationship to the fact. So that border is artificial. Mexican folk who are coming here, documented or not, let's be clear, are coming home. Their families were here before our families were here in almost every instance. But we forget that, and then we say things like, well, I don't mind them coming. I just want them to come legally like my people did. The hell does that even mean? Come legally? There was no law to break when our people came. The fact that we didn't break a law that didn't even exist, you don't get cookies for that. You don't get like a pat on the back and a gold star because your great, great, great whatever was law abiding when there was no law that he could have violated even if he wanted to. But we've told this lie that we came for these upstanding principles. So we'll say things like, well, you know, our people came for liberty and freedom. These people are just coming for stuff. They're just coming for jobs. They're just coming for health care. They're just coming for stuff. We came for high-minded principle. right? Because we believe that. What kind of third grade version of American history is that, right? Like when Donald Trump says, well, Mexico's not sending their best. What the hell, you think Europe sent their best? Our people were the losers of Europe. The winners didn't get on the boat. You understand what I'm saying? The winners didn't leave. Why the hell would you leave if you were winning? Only the losers left because they had no choice. They were dying. They were starving. They couldn't support their families.
If I were to ask you why I can't use the N-word, and you were to say, well, Evan, because you're not black, I would say, fair. And then if I were to ask you why I can't use a word that is commonly found in a burrito to describe a Latino person, and you were to say, well, Evan, because you're not Hispanic, I would say also fair, valid. But if I were to ask you why I can't use the F slur to describe homophobes like Matt Walsh or Steven Crowder, and you were to say, well, Evan, because you're not gay, I would then say, how many dudes do I need to kiss? Is it one dude per slur use? Or can I do something like super fucking gay and get an unlimited monthly pass of that shit? Because I got some shit to get off of my chest about these pussy ass white boys. And I don't know a better fucking word than that one. So yeah, I'm willing to pay my dues. So if you could just let me know in the comments, like how it works. Like I feel like it would be fair for me to put my money where my mouth is. Where my mouth is. That was an unfortunate turn of phrase.
Africans in Africa treat white people so much better than they treat black people. So I just saw another video from another creator, and she is an African woman. She did not tell one lie in her video. Let me tell you how I knew this was true. A couple years ago, I went to Zanzibar with a lot of my friends. We hired a guide. We were just having a time. Most of the time that we had been in Zanzibar, we were with our guide until we got to Nungwi Beach. So at the time, me and all of my friends are Hilton Diamond members, meaning we had the highest status of all of the guests there. It means that we come and we stay and we spend a lot of money in Hilton. Now at this hotel, I think that we had a drink package. I can't remember the specifics, but the drinks were free. That's important to note. So we're all sitting at the bar, we're ordering drinks, and before the bartender starts to make our drinks, I actually give him a really big tip. And $40 is a pretty good big tip for this area. And obviously you can see that me and all of my friends are black. After we had all placed our orders and gave this man a tip, another guest of the hotel came right after we had made our order, came and sat down. Of course, he was Caucasian, and the bartender made his drink before he made any of ours. No tip, no nothing. But this is the first time that my experience has actually been validated.
Yeah, folks, welcome back to my channel. And to understand why this moment has captured so much attention, we have to look beyond one speech and examine very, very carefully the political climate in America today. Since the returning to the White House, President Donald Trump has placed issues such as immigration, diversity programs, education, and the role of the federal government back at the center of the national debate. His supporters argue these policies are restoring merit, patriotism, and equal treatment under the law. But critics argue they risk overlooking the lasting effects of historical discrimination and weakening efforts to address racial inequality. That divide set the stage for Tim's wise remarks. So folks, rather than focusing on personalities, Wise challenged what he believes as misleading narrative about Black Americans and the nation's history. He argued that many of today's racial and economic disparities cannot be understood without acknowledging centuries of slavery, segregation, discriminatory housing policies, and unequal access to education and economic opportunities. According to Tim's Wise, the author, history is not simply about the past. It continues to influence the present. And that is where the debate becomes far more complicated, folks. Believe me or not, Supporters of Team Wise say America cannot solve problem it refuses to fully acknowledge. They believe an honest examination of history is very, very necessary to build a more equal future. His critics see things differently. Yeah, everybody is free to judge by on its own. They argue that America has made remarkable progress over the past several decades, and that constantly reviewing today's challenges through the lens of race risks creating even deeper division. False. They believe the focus should be on individual opportunity, economic growth, and shared national identity rather than historical grievances, to which I agree. This disagreement reflects one of the biggest questions facing Americans today. Is the country primarily shaped by its past or by the opportunities available today? False. This is that question has become increasingly important as debates over school curricula, diversity initiatives, voting rights, law enforcement, and economic policy continue to dominate the headlines. For some Americans, these discussions are about ensuring that difficult characters of history are never forgotten. For others, these are about ensuring that America's achievement and shared values are not overshadowed by its failures. Neither side sees this conversation as massively academic. Both sides believe the future of the country is at stake. That helps explain why Team Y's comments spread very quickly across the social media. Some viewers praised him for raising difficult questions that deserves attention. And as normally others reject. False. Others reject his arguments, saying they unfairly portray modern America and ignore the progress the nation has made. I don't know what progress, but as often happens today, false, the debate quickly expanded beyond one speech. Political commentators, journalists, community leaders, and everyday Americans all joined the conversation, each bringing different experiences and different interpretation of the same issues. And perhaps that reveals something even bigger. America's deepest political disagreements are no longer just about election. They are about history. Yeah. Identity, justice, opportunity, and competing versions of the country should become, whether you agree with Team Wise, President Donald Trump, or somewhere in between, one thing is difficult to ignore. This conversation continues to shape the national politics, influence public opinion, and affect how millions of America understand their country's past, and not forgetting its future. Now the question is no longer whether this debate will continue. The real question is how it will shape the next character of the United States. Now it's your turn, folks. After watching everything you have seen today, where do you stand? Did Team White raise important questions that deserve more attention? Or do you believe these critics have a stronger case? Whether their perspectives keep the conversation respectful and constructive, Some of the most important discussions are the ones where people with different viewpoints are willing to listen and as well as to speak. If you find this analysis informative, please don't let the conversation end here. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all, and your perspective could be featured in a future video of mine. And if you enjoyed in deep depth political commentary that goes beyond the headlines and examine the stories shaping America today, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notification, and give this video a thumbs up.